If you are a CityCast superfan, you've definitely heard us singing the praises of our longtime supporter, Paulson & Nace. So there's big news. Paulson & Nace is now Nace Law Group. Same great team, just with a new name. When you are hurt by the negligence of others, you want a lawyer that will actually fight for you, not one that will settle for the bare minimum. Nace's compassionate lawyers fight to bring cases to juries, so you can get everything you deserve. If you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Nace Law Group for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.washingtondcinjurylawyers.com or call 202-463-1999. Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about the controversies around DC's U.S. Attorney nominee. We're talking about the city's efforts to dismantle homeless encampments, which have a new political edge in the age of Donald Trump. And we're talking about the very weird theft of Kristi Noem's purse. Plus, a members-only fourth section about the surprising local history of Toys R Us, soon to be a major motion picture. Stick around for the reference to a beloved Adams Morgan bar. I'm here with Washington Post columnist Marc Fisher and my colleague Priyanka Tilve. Today is Friday, April 25th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Marc.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Likewise.
Hey, Priyanka.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Before we get into today's show, I would like to take a second just to talk about our new membership program. It's called CityCast Neighbors.
Yeah, so we are in the middle of our spring campaign. It's a 2-week campaign where we are trying to get 85 new neighbors. Now, DC needs a win right now. We are doing this campaign across the CityCast network. Whoever gets the most members gets to prove that they're the best city. So if you've been thinking about joining our membership program, now is the time to do it. And it's very worth it, if I do say so myself. Becoming a CityCast neighbor means that you not only support our work and help us stick around, but you also unlock a bunch of incredible benefits that make living in DC more rewarding and honestly more fun. Mike, want to hit them with some of the benefits?
Yeah, we have members-only events. We've done happy hours. It's really cool. We get to meet people, talk to people, hear ideas from people, which we often turn into episodes. David Plotz, who runs the company, also does Civil War tours on the side. So there's a tour of DC Civil War forts. You also get everyone can get the email newsletter, but you get a special curated events email every week so you can plan ahead for the best things happening around town. Oh, and you get to listen to this podcast without hearing me read ads. Which I think is a shame because I'm really good at it, but I could see why you might not want that.
Yeah. If I could just double down on that fort. So again, Plotz leads this Civil War tour deep in Rock Creek Park. It's for this fort called Fort DeRossi. And it is the highest rated experience on Airbnb in DC, which is wild. It's also sold out for the rest of the year. And so if you're interested in going on this tour, which is very cool, this is literally your only way to do it. He's going to be doing a tour for anyone who becomes a member in May. But if there are people who want to take the tour and are CityCast neighbors and can't make it on the day that we've picked, he'll do it again. Like, that is how this membership program works. We are so excited to be able to give you unique experiences that make DC more exciting. We'll also thank you on air. So, for example, we'd love to thank our newest CityCast DC neighbors, Trey G, Leslie H, Kevin S, Benjamin C, and Aida M. And all of our members will get the chance to shout out their favorite local business or nonprofit. So we're just kind of, feeding into that virtuous cycle of community building here in DC.
Oh, and the ones who joined this week get a mug too.
Yes. Oh my God. And it's such a great mug. So, if you're listening to this episode with your coffee in hand, just think about how much cuter it'll look in a CityCast Neighbors mug.
At the end of the day, you get more out of the show and you get more out of the city. So I think you should do it, please. So Marc, you wrote a humdinger of a column this week about Ed Martin. For the uninitiated, can you explain who the dude is and why he is the subject of humdinger columns?
Absolutely. Ed Martin is a guy from Missouri who somehow, through the miracle of Donald Trump's presidency, has become the interim U.S. attorney, the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C., which makes him, in some ways, the top prosecutor of all U.S. attorneys' offices in the country because the D.C. office is unique. It is the only one that is both a federal prosecutor handling the big highfalutin cases, national security, and so on, and the local prosecutor handling street crime, all the sort of basic crimes that are so troubling to so many people. Ed Martin is a diehard conservative. He grew up in Phyllis Schlafly's right-wing Eagle Forum movement, where he was an officer. He's been highly active, worked at anti-abortion groups in Missouri. He's basically new to Washington, and he arrived guns blazing and very much in the audience of one tradition surrounding Trump. He has aimed his policies, and he's had a lot of initiatives. He's aimed them at satisfying the big boss. And in doing so, he remains true to his own background as a lawyer who defended January 6th attackers.
He was there that day, right?
He was not only there, he enjoyed the heck out of it. He tweeted that it was Mardi Gras in D.C. and said it was all about love, faith, and joy.
An absolutely wild comparison.
Yes, totally wild. But wild is exactly the right word for what Ed Martin has done in the short 2-3 months that he's been the interim U.S. attorney. He has demoted the top lawyers in the office who handled all those cases against the January 6th rioters. He's not just demoted them, he's demoted them in the most insulting, degrading way possible. He has taken them from the highest positions in the office, and he now has them doing what's called papering, which is the intake of cases, the entry-level position dealing with misdemeanors, so shoplifting and things like that. And these are some of the most senior, experienced, and most respected people in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He demoted a bunch of them. He sacked a lot of people. He took what's called the Lewis list, this is the list of the most dangerous cops in the city. The police officers who have been accused of various violent acts and otherwise problematic kind of resumes that they have. And he has said, we're not going to use that list. We're not going to use that list to screen who we want to use as witnesses in our cases in superior court, in federal court. So it's really an extraordinary ransacking of the office. At least one prosecutor has resigned in protest. A bunch of others have left the office. A whole bunch more I spoke to are looking to leave. It's a very tough market for lawyers in D.C. these days, given all of those that have been fired or have resigned on principle. So it's a real mess over there. And what a lot of the people I spoke to, including former U.S. attorneys, what they said is they're worried that this is going to have a big impact on crime, not making the city safer, as Ed Martin promises to, but making it more dangerous because jurors will come to the court and they will have read and heard all of this stuff about what Martin is doing, and they will say, I don't trust what the prosecutors are saying in this case. I don't believe them necessarily. I'm not going to take their word for it, and therefore I may acquit someone even in a case that's solid, and even in a case where you got really bad guys who are coming up for judgment on the part of jurors. So that's the big worry. And I was hearing that from both Republican and Democratic former U.S. attorneys.
Wow, I've never heard that kind of argument about safety. That's a very unique perspective.
It's something that everyone I spoke to found to be highly disturbing. These are people who love that office, who love the lawyers who are there, who think they're the cream of the crop, and they are now worried that their credibility is shot because of the actions of Ed Martin, which are clearly backed up by the president and his Justice Department, his Attorney General.
So this is what I thought was really unique and strong about what you wrote, which is, we have read a lot about Ed Martin these last few months, about him being a January 6th activist, about his weird 150 or however many it is appearances on Russian state propaganda TV. But because of the weirdness of that office, that it is both a traditional U.S. attorney and a local DA that prosecutes street crime, this thing of, when you apply the kind of Trumpian politics to it and say, well, we're not going to we're not going to worry about dirty cops anymore and so on, how that actually affects day-to-day safety in the city. Because if you put dirty cops up there, if people start to think cops are dirty, then it's harder to get convictions that you ought to get. There's been much less attention, understandably, I guess, but there's been much less attention to his fitness for this role of local street crime prosecutor.
Absolutely. And this is something that his predecessors in the office pointed out to me, which is that he's never been a prosecutor before. That is unique in the modern history of that office. He has extremely limited experience in criminal law at all. He has really worked much more as an advocate, a political advocate, a political activist than he has as a lawyer. He has a one-man firm in St. Louis, but he defended a bunch of those January 6th guys, not a whole lot of other criminal law experience. So this is very troubling because what his deputies are saying is that when they have discussions with him about cases, he doesn't know the law. He doesn't know what their parameters are, how far they can go on a particular case. And we've seen this in his rare public appearances around town, where he talks about taking sweeping actions to hit crime. And there are things that the lawyers in the office say, well, we can't do that. That's not within the power of a prosecutor. And he has what seems to be unsurpassed confidence in himself, which is sometimes a lovely thing. But in this case, he's out there making promises and saying things to audiences that they can't possibly keep those promises. So it's a troubling situation. He made one appearance in Anacostia before an audience that I wouldn't describe as hostile, but it certainly was skeptical, and it was a disaster. By the end of it, people were hooting back at him, and because he clearly doesn't know the city. He makes awkward, weird references to the 8th Ward. Well, nobody says that in Washington. He makes strange references to neighborhoods that he clearly hasn't been to. So, cocky guy, arrogant guy, lack of knowledge of the law, political agenda. It's a recipe for less effective crime fighting in the district.
So I'm curious about how that office works with other parts of the D.C. government, because it has a different reporting structure. As we all learned from watching Law and Order, the police and the prosecutors must work closely together. But is he able to, or how often does that office pick up the phone and call MPD and say, we want you guys to make a priority out of this, or don't make a priority out of that? I wrote a couple of weeks ago about the cops talking about investigating Tesla graffiti, anti-Doge graffiti as a hate crime. Nobody could tell me where that came from. Is that the kind of thing that a U.S. attorney in D.C. could set the police on?
Yeah, it's not a formal you will now do this kind of authority, but it is a very clear moral authority, and it's always been a very cooperative relationship. And you can see the police chief now struggling to try to conform to as much of Martin's agenda as she can while still staying true to her officers and to the city government and to the law. And so the chief is in a real tough position because her officers' cases only go anywhere if this prosecutor's office does something with them. So they're mutually dependent, the police and the prosecutors, and yet what we have here is a lot of the prosecutors feeling that they've been stripped of their credibility and authority. Now, Martin has made very strong statements in support of the blue, in support of the officers.
Except for the ones who got clobbered on January 6th.
Right, exactly. And sadly, he seems to be particularly solicitous of officers who've had disciplinary troubles. Those are the ones on that Lewis list that he is now not going to use anymore. So it's a tough relationship. And then, as you say, there's the city government, there's the mayor and the council to whom the U.S. attorney doesn't report, but the police chief does. And so there are these different now contrasting allegiances and alignments that used to work pretty well when you had very cooperative U.S. attorneys. The U.S. attorney, of course, does report to Congress. The U.S. attorney has to be confirmed by Congress. So that's the process that's imminent, because Martin can only stay in this interim job until sometime in mid-May. So only a few more weeks. And at the moment, what we're watching is a bunch of Democratic senators led by Adam Schiff of California, Dick Durbin of Illinois, saying this guy is not qualified. We're not going to support him, and we're going to try to take some steps to delay or obstruct his confirmation. Now, U.S. attorneys generally don't get hearings. The tradition is there's just a unanimous consent, and the Senate says, yeah, go ahead, he's fine. But in this case, the Democrats are asking for hearings. There's no reason to believe the Republicans will give them one, but there is reason to be concerned, if you're on Martin's side, that the clock will run out, that his time, maximum allowed time as interim, will run out before he's confirmed. In that case, it would be up to the judges in D.C., the federal judges, to pick the next U.S. attorney.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it is really notable to me that Ed Martin has had such a dramatic impact on the city while still unconfirmed and in such a short period of time. I feel like a lot of people in the city didn't really pay attention to who the U.S. attorney was ever. And now he is somewhat of a household name and someone that people are concerned about. I'm also curious, obviously, people like Adam Schiff, we expect him to be criticizing the U.S. attorney. A lot of the lawyers who have been ousted from that office as well are likely to be critiquing what he's doing. You've mentioned that everyone you spoke to was critical. Did you talk to people? I know you probably can't name names, but did you talk to people who are deputies of Ed Martin, people that he appointed, people that you would have expected to support what he's doing, and they're not?
Yeah, I mean, generally when a new U.S. attorney comes in, they bring sort of their own posse into the office with them at the top of management of the office. Ed Martin has brought in someone to take over the PR operation for the U.S. Attorney's Office, someone who came from One America News, a very sketchy right-wing news organization. And this guy... I got off to a bad start with him because he denied me access to Martin, the interview that I asked for. But at the top of the office, the people who should be putting Martin's agenda into play, there's really nobody he's brought in. He did promote as his principal assistant someone who was already in the office, who was known in the office as a Trump supporter, and she is kind of doing the implementation of some of his directives, but she appears to be the only real loyalist that he has on his side. So he doesn't have that traditional power center of the posse that we've seen from previous U.S. attorneys. But he does have the support of the White House, so that makes up for something. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has been very vocally supportive of Martin.
Porch Fest is back! On Saturday, May 3rd, 2025, come out to Adams Morgan for a free, family-friendly music festival. Experience live performances on porches, patios, and public spaces all throughout the neighborhood. DC is home to so many talented musicians spanning every style and genre. This year's festival is headlined by Gangsta Grass, an Emmy-nominated bluegrass hip-hop fusion band. So get some butts together and come on down to Boogie and enjoy the community this spring. Grab your wristband at the festival headquarters to score discounts and offers at bars, restaurants, and retailers throughout the neighborhood. Join us on May 3rd. For more info and the full lineup, visit admodc.org/porchfest and be sure to follow @admobid on Instagram for updates.
After the Fact, a podcast by Pew, keeps it real with data-driven insights on today's big issues. No spin, just facts, mixed with stories from experts, policymakers, and people making a difference. Whether you're into the research or the personal stories behind it, we've got you covered. So what are you waiting for? Listen to After the Fact wherever you get your podcasts. Another story this week that, Priyanka, you were paying particular attention to, and it's a little bit like the Ed Martin story in that it involves the sort of extent of influence, soft influence or like hard influence that the White House may have over D.C. We've talked about this on pod over the years, the Bowser administration's efforts to clear homeless encampments. I think we did an episode on this in like 2023.
Yeah, after the infamous like McPherson Square clearings. Mm-hmm.
But now it has taken on a sort of different edge because Trump himself has called for the federal authorities to dismantle all homeless encampments on federal property in D.C., which is a lot of the open space in D.C. And the mayor seems to be continuing her thing. She says it has nothing to do with Trump, but looking at the sort of timeline, it's harder to, a lot of people don't believe that. What has happened this week that's caused this thing to be in the news?
Yeah, I think that tension you just mentioned is kind of critical to the story and hard to know definitively because so there have been 21 homeless encampments cleared since Trump took office, which is a very high number. More than 40 people have been moved from wherever they were in these encampments, not necessarily to housing or shelter. Just a lot of times this means that we're just clearing one encampment and it's cropping up somewhere else. Like you mentioned, Bowser has said that this has nothing to do with Trump. It's stuff they had planned. The city does say that this is on pace with the pace of clearings in 2024, which we have very regularly reported on, whether on this show or in our newsletter, Hey DC, we've regularly reported on the city clearing encampments and the criticism from advocates and activists that come with that. So it is hard to say if they are actually picking up pace. But like you said, because Trump has put such a spotlight on, quote, like beautifying the city, it makes it seem at the very least like this is a response. As in, it seems like the city is just doing what Trump says. And there was a really great Washington Post article out this week that points out that this is extremely problematic because we're seeing these clearings happen, but we're not seeing the pace of affordable housing increase. We're not seeing these people being put into any sort of shelters or homes. Again, they're just being moved from one place to another. And the annual point in time count, which is a federally required annual census of local unhoused populations, showed that there was a 14% increase in the number of people living on the streets from 2023 to 2024. More people last year were homeless in DC than at any point since 2020. And there are concerns that that situation could get even worse as we plummet towards a potential recession, especially locally. So basically, it seems like the homelessness problem in DC is getting worse, and the city's solutions for it are just not actually addressing the root problem.
What struck me from the reporting this week about homelessness in the district was that the numbers of homeless people are large. 5,000 was the count that I saw. And the number of people affected by these removals of encampments is tiny. I mean, there were 41 encampments swept clear or 21, and it impacted only about 40 people, which is, comparatively a drop in the bucket. And so it made me think this is all in this Trump world we're living in. This is all about appearances. And Trump doesn't care about what happens to the homeless people. He just wants them out of his sight, as emperors often do. And so what happened here is you have people being swept from the street and there's nowhere for them to go. The very same week we're seeing all this reporting about the closing of encampments, Trump put out an executive order that said that his administration will oppose any housing first policy. And housing first is the policy that says just give people a place to stay. Don't worry yet about their addictions and their mental health troubles and all of that. Just get them a place to stay, and then you can deal with those things. Well, Trump, and not that Trump knows anything about this, but some of his folks seem to oppose this. And so now it's going to be banned, which means the feds won't give any money for it. And so this sweeping of encampments, while I think most people would agree the encampments are not a good thing, there's no there. There's no other side, as you said, Priyanka, to what happens to these people after they've been swept.
And I think that this is a place where the politics of it are weird, and Trump is not necessarily on the wrong side of the politics of it. And the Post reporting was really strong about the what sweeping homeless encampments does when the goal is to allow people to live in dignity and not have to sleep on the streets, and how it is counterproductive to that goal. There was nobody quoted who was like, I really hate having to walk past tents where people are sleeping in my own neighborhood, things like that. I'm not saying that's a morally equivalent point of view, but that is, in politics, and whether it's city politics or national politics, that is a view that a lot of people hold, even if they're not necessarily proud to hold it. And this sort of issue always puts advocates in the awkward position of essentially defending a status quo in which certain numbers of people sleep, in tents or in parks, and that's not a thing to defend politically. It's obviously people are saying they're going to be sleeping here tonight, and the best way to get them into a new status quo that's not this way is to not disrupt the encampment. So I sort of get that, but the politics of it are still sort of screwy, and it may be one where Trump, in his sort of lizardy way, kind of touches something that a broader part of the public feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people stay in encampments because they don't feel safe in shelters. The encampments also do have, for some people, somewhat of a community aspect to them. It becomes kind of like a support circle. People are staying in tents near their friends. And so obviously people ideally would not be living on the streets at all. But if the options are an encampment that feels like a community versus a shelter where you don't necessarily feel safe, it feels in some ways inhumane to force people out of the situation that they are more comfortable with when both options are bad.
That's true. On the other hand, these are not just the ugly settings that so offend the president. They're also encampments that pose health issues. There are lots of rats around some of the encampments. People walking by have been harassed from time to time. So they do present more of a problem than just we don't have any other place to put people. And the other aspect of this seems almost petty to mention, but this goes very quickly to the usual battles between the city and the feds, because many of the encampments, indeed most of them, are on federally controlled land, National Park Service controlled land, whether it be at intersections or in parts of parkland. And so the irony here is that the president is ordering the city to clean up the encampments when it's his own government, the National Park Service, that has the authority to do that.
Right.
That's so true.
All right, so every Mother's Day, we treat my mom to a special day out. She gets her nails done. We take her to tea. We go out for dinner, or we make her dinner. That sort of thing. Now, I can do all of that because I happen to live close by her. But a lot of my friends don't live near their parents at all. And all their mom wants is a phone call. But what if you could get her something more than just the phone call? That's where Aura Frames comes in. Do you have a funny photo of you and your friends or you and your family that she would love as a keepsake in addition to that phone call? You can send her a new picture of you and the gang right from your phone. I mean, even my tech-averse mom would be a huge fan of that. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's auraframes.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Williams. I grew up in the DMV and I still love it here. I love the food, the diversity, and just how smart people are in DC. I started listening to CityCast DC in 2023 after I came across it on social media. What I love about the show is that while everybody else is talking about national politics, CityCast DC focuses entirely on local, and they do it in a laid-back way, like we're just having a conversation about it. I know I could listen to this show for free, but I decided to support it because it makes the city feel like a neighborhood, and that's something I really value. When you become a CityCast DC neighbor, you help the city feel more like a neighborhood too. And not only do you help make life in DC better, but you also get access to perks like ad-free listening, regular events, and an exclusive events look-ahead email. You can join me and become a CityCast DC neighbor by going to membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. Thanks for making the city better with me.
So the chattiest piece of news of the week, I'm pretty sure, is the saga of Kristi Noem's purse. For the uninitiated, Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, was at dinner at the Capitol Burger with members of her family who were in for Easter. Sometime during this meal, someone, a white male in a baseball cap and an N95 mask, stole her purse from under the table. The purse, it turned out, contained a lot of stuff, including her DHS ID and $3,000 in cash, which she says was to pay for stuff for the family around Easter.
Because around Easter, nobody takes credit cards.
When was the last time you carried around $3,000 in cash?
Literally never.
I can't remember. I mean, sometimes like going on a big foreign trip where I'm going to need a lot of cash, but that's about it.
Right. Like when I went to go cover the Iraq war, they sent me with a lot of cash because it was like a country in ruins that was that did not have credit card machines. But I'm lucky if I'm walking around with $3 in cash these days. And in a lot of parts of downtown D.C., it's hard to pay with cash.
That's true. And it's very curious because, I mean, certainly in restaurants, there are restaurants that don't take cash, although they should. And so it raised all sorts of questions, perhaps unfair questions, about what she might actually have really needed the $3,000 in cash for. And of course, the cynics out there wondered whether it was to pay for, say, an illegal housekeeper or something like that. But we have no idea what she really needed the $3,000 for. And then there are people who are critiquing her placement of her purse at her feet, not exactly the most secure place to put it. But I think the biggest question, the one that's gotten the most chortles from the other side politically, is where were her Secret Service guys? Because if you've ever been in a D.C. restaurant when some dignitary who has security came in, you know that the Secret Service, for example, will often take the table next to the dignitary. So I was once at a Japanese place in Glover Park with my then 8-year-old son, and we were told, sorry, no tables, you're going to have to wait. And then suddenly a table was available. Why was it suddenly available? Because Joe Biden, then the vice president, was there with Jill Biden, and the restaurant had kept the table next to him empty for security purposes. But since I was with my 8-year-old, they thought we're probably not assassins, and so they gave us the table next to the Bidens. And I realized that the Secret Service guys were actually 2 tables away, and they were eating dinner. So it's not the kind of case where they're standing guard over the table of the dignitary.
So did your 8-year-old think, Mrs. Biden's purse is pretty tempting, sitting there under the chair?
We have it here in the house now. And
NBC4 reported on Wednesday night that there had been an almost identical theft at the Westin Hotel, not far away from the Capitol Burger, a couple of nights earlier. Man in an N95 mask and a baseball hat stole a bag from a visiting Massachusetts tourist. And she was interviewed and said, she had been feeling really dumb. Like, how could she? And her husband and members of her family were feeling very guilty that they allowed this to happen, and they felt less bad now that it turned out that the Secretary of DHS, with security by the Secret Service, had been victim of the same thing as them.
Oh, see, they probably did it on purpose. They just let the purse go to make anyone else who's ever suffered a theft feel better.
Or at least to get some story out to bolster their notion that the district is a lawless place filled with street crime. So they had to create their own example of it.
Wait, so is this a thing where Ed Martin could say, like, I'm going to throw the book at this Kristi Noem purse thief and cause investigators to make it a high priority?
He can certainly nudge or order his prosecutor to take the case a little more seriously than one would ordinarily take a purse snatching. But the law is the law. I mean, he can't, if they catch the guy, he can't put him away for more than what the guidelines provide for.
And maybe it'll be one of those senior people he fired because this seems like the lowest level of crime to prosecute.
Exactly.
I'd watch out if I was that purse snatcher. These are some tough prosecutors. So I guess that is a great full circle moment to close on. Today, paid subscribers get a bonus 4th roundup chat about a potential Toys R Us movie and its humble DC beginnings. If you want to be sure to always get the full episode, become a CityCast neighbor. Head to membership.citycast.fm and sign up. As you've already heard, members get all kinds of special perks and the joy of supporting local journalism. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, and Ash Durbin. Newsletter editors Kayla Cote-Stemmerman and Natalia Aldana wrote our fabulous newsletter Hey DC this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Rue Walker, Blue Lou, Philip Ayers, DM, and Wendy Marcini from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell someone about it next time you give them a plush toy? We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.